that video sets the context and the tone for how we think change is going to occur. Because we know it's not going to come from politicians or professionals, it's going to come from us. And that's why this conference is so important, as was the Disability Summit earlier this month.
Sorry, where's your...
It's on the desktop. So we think it's really important that we take control of our lives and the agenda around what we want from a right to independent living. We don't want other people deciding that, because we know if policymakers, politicians set the agenda, then they'll water it down, they'll corral us into systems where it's non-disabled people assessing us, measuring us, restricting us, and doing all those sorts of things. So this is an ongoing process where we can really have our voice, where we can say what it is that we require from a right to independent living, a legal right to independent living, and what that should look like in practice on the ground. And we began this process in the workshop on independent living earlier this month, as I said, at the Disabled People's Summit. And we're taking it forward into today's conference. And what I tried to do is capture some of the themes that emerged in that workshop and from our members in ROFA, in Equal Lives, in DPAC, of what, and in the campaign to save the ILF, and what good looks like. So this is about creating a vision, not hamstrung by politics, austerity, cuts, any party political position. This is what disabled people see as what we need in order to live equal and independent lives. So I think what emerged in the conference earlier this month was that we want a right to independent living, and certainly that's what the United Nations is saying in all its judgments on the British government, in its article on independent living. And we want a universal national independent living service. We don't want the postcode lottery that is social care at the moment. And so it needs to be paid for out of direct taxation. We can't have it being rationed by Labour or Conservative authorities or whatever political party happens to be in control locally. We can't have our lives being determined by local politicians and local interest where we might just lose out. It needs to be free at the point of delivery alongside the NHS. So we move away from this ration system where it's means tested, where only those poorest disabled people in society have access to social care. Because what we're facing at the moment is a catastrophe. And that's what the UN said, but that's what disabled people said in all the workshops and the conferences, that the local authorities are cutting budgets by 50, 60, 70%. Many disabled people are having their social care completely removed in the assessment process. So it feels very much like the transfer from DLA to PIP, where tens and hundreds of thousands of people are losing their right to PIP through that transfer process. Every time people are assessed by local authority social workers, the packages never go up. Disabled people's needs go up as we get older, our lives become more complex, but as our needs for support to live independent lives go up, our packages are being slashed or removed altogether. So it needs to be free at the point of delivery and based on need. Clearly, the government has nothing to offer. They've delayed again the Green Paper. On the expert group, there are no disabled people, there are no DPOs in terms of designing the new system, and as Ellen said, it's just focusing on older disabled people, how they can grab people's houses to make people pay for their social care. And it's been delayed to May 2018. Local authorities have had cuts of about 40%, we reckon, since 2010, and the cuts over the next 4 years that are working their way through will take that way over 50%. So that we're seeing the sorts of budgets cuts to direct payments support, direct payments social care, up around 40%, and it will go much higher. Each local authority around the country now are preparing budgets for next year with hundreds of millions of pounds locked in. Because adult social care is always, or nearly always, the biggest spender in any local authority, that means the cuts will disproportionately hit disabled people. Personal contributions. There are a whole number of issues around the lack of social care, or as we call it, the No Care Act. The Care Act has enabled local authorities now to means test even further and reassess people's income. And we believe that a lot of the practices that local authorities are implementing are illegal, that they breach the No Care Act's guidance. Personal contributions is one of them. In our local authority in Norfolk, they're doing remote financial assessments on people. So people are now receiving bills for their personal contributions which have been risen, and some people are getting bills for their social care that are higher than the actual value of their personal budget, so you couldn't make it up. We've had a whole number of people contacting Equal Lives and the local authority as well, ironically, saying they're giving up their social care because they can no longer afford to have it. Because if it's a question of, do I eat, do I pay my rent, or do I have social care, people are giving up their social care. So you've got the situation where people have been assessed as needing social care under the Care Act, but then they're giving it up because they can't afford it. And this is a ridiculous situation that we're in 2017. The other issue that is coming up within, and it affects disabled people's organisations who are supporting disabled people to manage their personal budgets, to manage their direct payments and manage their own care. And local authorities, as Alan said, are bringing in payment cards, not for our interests, to make it better and easier for us, but so that they can monitor what people are doing. Although there's no level of fraud in personal budgets, they're bringing it in so that they control the system. One of the other things they're doing is that they're taking away contracts from DPOs for supported accounts, for payroll, for employment support, and taking it in-house. So they're saying that they're going to do it. So Surrey Centre for Independent Living has had 60% cuts to its funding because the local authority took away the supported accounts. Our local authority in Norfolk is doing the same thing to Equal Lives. So we're going to be doing a survey coming up around personal contributions because we want to delve into this more, but also we want to hear from other DPULOs in local authority areas where similar things are happening, because this is, again, restricting choice and control. It's going back to the bad old days where social services control our lives. As I said, every local authority up and down the country is facing huge austerity cuts over the next 4 years, up through to 2022. And it's Labour authorities as well as Tory authorities that are doing this. So I'm really pleased that Ellen said the focus is on the Labour Party. I put together with Peter Beresford an article based on the workshop at the Disability Summit, and that's in this month's Labour briefing, which is targeted at the leadership of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, to actually get this on their agenda. Because what we don't want to be fobbed off with is some sort of rehashed social care system that's based on private providers with the postcode lottery that we have. So it's really important that we also, have that conversation in the lead up to a general election with the leadership of the Labour Party. And I think we really need to move the conversation on. It was fantastic that John McDonnell made that video that we played at the beginning of the Disability Summit, where he said he's going to be taking DPAC and disabled people into government with him. We need to have co-production before the Labour Party goes into government, so that the system, we're ready to go from day one with a system designed by us. At the moment we've got a system based on the Poor Law, or the principles of the Poor Law, of means and needs testing. The interesting situation, I think, where it differs, where the Poor Law was based on, the deserving and the undeserving poor. And in the past, we've been seen as the deserving poor. But the poisonous rhetoric, the poisonous discourse, since the coalition government came into power, and now the successive Tory governments, is that we're no longer seen as the deserving poor. We're seen as a burden on society. We're problematised. We're seen as useless eaters, and that's not good. That's not acceptable. So it's moved on. I think the research from the University of Oxford that was published last week, which showed that 120,000 older disabled people and care home residents have died as a result of the cuts to social care since 2010, is very powerful, and we need to use that. When we did the submission to the United Nations, both for the inquiry and for the government's examination, we used evidence and we evidenced every argument that we had. The government's report was a disgrace. It was all based on assertion and not backed up by anything. And the fact that they kept saying we're the leading government in country in the world around disability was completely blown apart, because the UN actually said to them, actually the evidence shows that you're going backwards, and you're not. So we've got very powerful evidence to back up everything that we're arguing for. So, and I think that's really important, that we are going to be designing a new right to independent living, and what an independent living service would look like is based on evidence, our lived experience, the experience in this room and in the wider disability movement, but also on evidence from research of what doesn't work. So we're going to plan today, take the planning forward for what we want from an independent living service. It's not going to be rationed based on neoliberal ideology. It's not going to be there for private providers to make profits off our backs. And we're not going to be assessed to death. We're going to abolish the postcode lottery and take it away from local authorities. We don't want local authorities determining our future. Personalisation is dead, as is the Care Act. It's not fit for purpose and needs to be scrapped. And the new system needs to be based on the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People and our contributions and the committee inquiries and the concluding observation and general comment on Article 19. So we're going to have it enshrined in law, and these are just emerging ideas, but I think it's really important that we discuss these and come to a view of how we want it organised. But the thoughts are at the moment that we need a new independent living service managed by central government, led by disabled people, but delivered locally. And that we need to learn the lessons and build on the Independent Living Fund as a model for what we want for the future. Not saying the Independent Living Fund was perfect or ideal, but what can we learn, what were the best things, what can we learn from that, what can we take forward? The local services need to be shaped and delivered by user-led disabled people's organisations, cooperatives and social enterprises. It will be for need, not profit, and it will not be means-tested. It will be independent of, but sit alongside the NHS, and will be funded from direct taxation, as I said earlier. There's a much bigger job to do in helping the NHS move to adopting a social model of disability, distress and ageing. So it will need to be alongside the NHS, not absorbed or taken into the NHS. Because again, we would lose our control, we would lose our choice. We need to move away from obviously, the discriminatory and cruel approaches of welfare reform. So this National Independent Living Service needs to sit in central government. And what we're talking about is two things really. We need to have a focus across government, because independent living isn't just about social care, and that came out of the workshop very clearly. Although people in the workshop said, if I can't get out of my bed, if I can't get out of my house, there's no point in having accessible transport, there's no point in having accessible education, because we're prisoners in our own homes, or if you're stuck in an institution and can't escape, then there's no point. So social care is a big priority. So we need to move disabled people's independent living out of the ghetto that it's stuck in at the moment in the DWP. The Office of Disability Issues is stuck in DWP, which labels us as welfare scroungers, as welfare recipients. We want a cross-government body that's going to address and have action plans in every government department to make disability equality very real, whether it be in transport, education, schools, arts and culture, whatever. But the Independent Living Service needs to be nationally organised in central government and delivered, as I said, by disabled people's organisations. It will obviously work with non-disabled allies who share our critique of the existing system and who work to social models of disability and distress. The other thing is we need to recast the debate, the dialogue, because at the moment it's a very negative dialogue, it's a very negative discourse. And we need to see disabled people and social care as an economic generator, a social and economic generator. There's a £1.5 million workforce, which at the moment is a marginal pool of low-grade, low-skilled, low-paid workers. We need to see that and recast it as a jewel in the service sector crown, in the service industry crown. We need to see disabled people as, in a positive sense, in a positive way of us growing economies. So in rural areas, for instance, in Norfolk, disabled people who live in villages are often the largest employer in that village. If the pub's closed and the shop's closed, the disabled person who employs 5 or 6 PAs is the major employer in that village. is a major economic generator. So we need to recast the discourse, the arguments. We also need to see it in terms of thinking about our well-being. The Care Act is supposed to be about well-being, but as everybody knows, the first thing to go when a social worker assesses our budgets is well-being activities. They're just taken away. You're not allowed to go to the gym anymore. You're not allowed to go out with your mates or go to the pub. You're not allowed to join an adult education class because they won't pay either for the class or the gym membership, or they won't give you a PA to get there. So it's completely upside down. So we need to see it in terms of turning the arguments on its head and really getting those arguments well rehearsed and well evidenced. We need it to take account of the changing demographics and the increasing need for all disabled people and people who acquire their impairments through their life course for support and to improve well-being during the life course. So at the moment it's polarised, as Ellen said. The new Green Paper is not going to talk about most of us, disabled people of working age. It's going to focus on how they can grab the resources from older disabled people and get their house off them to pay for it. We need to change that discourse and thinking about a lifelong service of how we support the whole of the population to live independently, to live well. So it's a needs-based, person-centred approach that will value us equally and be concerned with our needs, whatever our role, whether we are a disabled person, a worker, a service user or a citizen. And it would offer a truly sustainable and rights-based economy and society. So it's a much wider debate that we need to locate our demand for independent living in. So I hope that's just raised some of the themes that have come out of the discussions we've had so far in the conferences and in our DPOs. And clearly the demands of the disability movement really need to live. So nothing about us without us, and professionals on tap, not on top, have to guide this. We have to be in control. It has to be, it's our lives we're talking about. So it's us that has to take it forward, determine what its shape it looks like. And we need allies as politicians, in policymakers, to come alongside us and support us, to be in the lead, not to be just tokenistic adjuncts to what they wanted to do anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Alan, for that. I think a lot of those themes are going to be